I think we are ready to begin.
All right, this is Judge Voles, and I'll be presiding over this matter. I believe that the first thing I need to do is confirm whether or not there are any conflicts among our scoring panelists.
My scoring panelists, Your Honor, Adam do not have any conflicts.
All right.
I'm a scoring panelist, Your Honor, and I have no conflict.
All right. And who's our third panelist? I have Mr. Hepp, Ms. West, and who's the third scoring panelist for this matter?
I am the courtroom monitor, but would I also be the scoring panelist?
I am not sure. I didn't write down, when I was assigned to this courtroom, I was just listening for where I was assigned, and I don't believe I was asked to score. I'm not sure who has the answer to that.
And the only names I were given was yours, Judge, and then Mr. Adam Hepp and Miss Ann West.
All right. And can you score?
I can if you need me to.
All right. That would be helpful, I think. Yes, thank you. All right, then, and do you have any conflicts?
No, I'm all good.
All right, then I think the message is then we don't have any conflicts for our scoring in courtroom 4, but I think we're supposed to wait until we hear from all of the other courtrooms before we proceed. Mr. Vanderveer, this is Judge Bowles. Are you joining our courtroom as a scorer for this round?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Do you have any conflicts with any of the participants as far as you can tell?
No.
All right, so now we do have our three scorers, Mr. Hepp, Ms. West, and Mr. Vanderveer, and that way our monitor does not need to be a scorer. And we have no conflicts. So, Madam Monitor, I'll just be waiting to hear from you as to whether or not we are all set to go in light of whatever's happening in all the other courtrooms.
I was just told to tell everyone to turn their cameras on, please, and that just so everyone could start the pre-trial matters.
All right. Great. As I said, this is Judge Voles, and this is courtroom 4. And the matter of the people versus Avery Becker, I believe is the defendant's name. Who is representing the people in this matter? Is it Team E or Team H?
It is H, Your Honor.
H, all right. And would you please introduce the attorneys that will be participating on behalf of the people and the witnesses that you will be calling?
My name is Kalan Patel, representing the state of Colorado, along with my other co-counselors.
And who will be doing the opening argument on behalf of the people?
I will, Your Honor.
Right. And will you please tell us the names of your witnesses that you intend to call in the order that you intend to call them?
We intend to call Detective Markowitz to the stand, Alex Cifuentes.
I'm sorry. And Detective Markowitz, who will be representing Detective Markowitz? The name of the student that will be?
Olivia Bendon.
Bendon? All right. Mm-hmm. And then your second witness will be who and what student?
Our second witness will be Kyle Cusack, represented by Oliver Howe.
Howe, all right. And your third witness?
Our third witness will be Alex Cifuentes, represented by Zach Billings.
All right. And who will be doing the closing argument on behalf of the people?
Our closing argument will be done by Lena Dungeon. Excuse me, I misspoke. Aiden Feltz.
Right. All right. And you have other team members, I think, that are not going to be participating. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, on behalf of Team E, who wants to give me the names and identify the participants for Team E, who I understand will be the defense in this case?
Yes, Your Honor. Benjamin Hawley will be giving the opening statement. And for the witness order, we will first be calling Avery Becker, who is Eve Karmazin, then Taylor Perkins, who is Emma Barrist, and finally Blake Van Owen, Barrett Sharrow. and Alexa Moretti will be delivering the closing statement.
All right. And I'm sorry, say that last name for the closing for me, please.
Alexa Moretti.
All right. All right. And it looks like all of the cameras are working. And so I think the next step is for me to swear in the various groups that we have. So for the team members, would you please raise your right hands? And do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Please say I do. All right, or nod your heads because you're mute right now. For witnesses, will all the witnesses please raise their hands? Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material, facts, or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Please nod your affirmance to this. All right, thank you. And then finally, for our scoring panelists, if you would please raise your hands, do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Thank you. All right. I don't know that I need to go over all these rules with you. I understand you have been briefed on them in terms of we won't be accepting any sequestration requests. There won't be any pretrial motions. And I think and if I have to turn to my monitor to make sure that I have this correct in terms of which cameras are to be on, my understanding is that all of the cameras should be off except for the attorney that might be giving an opening statement or asking questions. And if it's an attorney asking question, the witness to whom they're addressing those questions can also have their cameras on. But otherwise, your cameras should be off and everyone should be mute except for those parties that are actively participating. So Madam Monitor, is there anything else I should be advising the parties with regard to the use of the video system?
No, that is all, Your Honor.
All right, and so let me just ask once again, prosecution, are you ready to proceed to trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
And defense, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Would the people like to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, we have an opening statement prepared.
All right, and other thing, I believe that we have timekeepers, and I believe that the timekeepers will be showing what time is left on the video. If for some reason that's not happening, if you will just either turn on your camera and say something or put something in the chat. Otherwise, I'm anticipating that everyone will be able to see what time they have and be able to proceed accordingly. So counsel, you may proceed with your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, the members of the jury and the opposing counsel. In February of 2020, the defendant, Avery Becker, was kicked off of her high school mock trial team, something that she's competed in for the past 4 years and dearly loved. She'd gone into a rage at his coach and vandalized his car. After getting kicked off of the team, the defendant told her mother that he would get his coach back if it was the last thing I do. A short time later, on March 6, 2020, the defendant went to Mr. Brackman's home and stabbed him to death, leaving him to die as he laid near his front door in a pool of blood. Avery Becker was rejected by Coach Brackman, went into a rage, and got his revenge. Good afternoon. My name is Callum Patel, and along with my co-counsel, Aiden Feltz and Sam Wolpert, we represent the people of the state of Colorado who are prosecuting the defendant for felony murder and burglary. We must prove these charges and each element of these charges beyond reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt does not mean any doubt. It is only a doubt that would cause reasonable people to hesitate and to act in matters of importance to themselves. Felony murder is still a first-degree murder. where during the course and furtherance of a crime, the death of Mackenzie Brackman was caused by anyone. The underlying crime in this case is that the defendant knowingly broke into an entrance and unlawfully entered Mr. Brackman's dwelling with the intent to commit therein a crime. In this case, the defendant broke into Mr. Brackman's home with the intent to vandalize his home, just as previously had vandalized his car. A scuffle occurred between the defendant and Mr. Brackman, but Mr. Brackman had armed himself with a kitchen knife. And then he continued to stab his coach. After gaining control of this knife, he continued to stab his coach in the left shoulder blade. The knife traveled down Mr. Brackman's chest cavity and sliced open his aorta. Mr. Brackman bled to death while trying to leave his own home. Detective Markowitz investigated this death. She oversaw the collection and processing of evidence from the scene. Doorbell and video system, which will show the intruder gaining access through the back patio door. The defendant was wearing a costume, including gloves, so facial recognition does not apply. The intruder does, however, fit the general height and build of the defendant. Detective Markowitz was alerted by Alex Cifuentes to the confrontations between the defendant and Mr. Brackman while at the Colorado High School mock trial team. Alex Cifuentes was a teammate of the defendant. Mr. Cifuentes provided Detective Markowitz with a text message chain that he had received from the defendant. In those messages, the defendant asked Mr. Cifuentes to help get back on the team. When that failed, the defendant told Mr. Cifuentes that he was going to go to Mr. Brackman's home and trash it. On Friday, March 6, 2020, the defendant thought Mr. Brackman would be at work. But when the defendant arrived, Mr. Brackman surprised him and lost his life trying to protect his home. Alex Cifuentes, who's been the defendant's teammate for years, will tell you that defendants exhibits erratic and impulsive behavior, in addition to the frequent fights between the defendant and Mr. Brackman. Alex will tell you how the defendant vandalized Mr. Brackman's classic car with a permanent marker. He will talk about a string of texts between him and the defendant, and how the defendant planned on vandalizing Coach Brackman's house. After reviewing the text messages, Detective Markowitz obtained the defendant's phone records for the day of the murder. The defendant's best friend, Taylor Perkins, called the defendant several times late morning and early afternoon, March 6. Using the cell tower data to track those calls, Detective Markowitz was able to track the movement of the defendant's cell phone tower to a cell tower very near Mr. Brackman's home. The route the phone follows shows a trial from the defendant's home to Mr. Brackman's house. The prosecution will show how close the defendant and Taylor Perkins have been, so much so that Taylor quit the team just so that the defendant could get back on when Mr. Brackman kicked off the defendant. Taylor was Avery's ride or die no matter what. She would testify to Avery's impulsive nature, as well as accuse Blair Rollins, a student who everyone thinks is a little bit weird, of the murder. Taylor will testify that she wanted to punch Alex in the face and thought that his apologies were insincere. And Detective Kyle Kuzak will testify to his beliefs and his extremely methodical 7-step process that drove his investigation into this matter. He will testify to his meticulous review of the crime scene. Detective Markowitz will explain how unlikely it is that Brackman was surprised by the intruder and likely armed himself with a knife before being alarmed by the Ring doorbell that detects motion and would send a notification to the user. He will also testify to the flawed conclusions of Professor Van Owens that he came to during his investigation. Detective Markowitz will testify to the Ring video showing a person the same weight and height as Avery Becker. Detective Markowitz will show...
Thank you, counsel. That will conclude the people's opening statement. Does the defense wish to make an opening statement at this time or reserve opening statement until the beginning of defense case?
Your Honor, we wish to make our opening statement now.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. When the evidence didn't fit, the investigation quit. So let's examine the prosecution's evidence. The prosecution has claimed that Ms. Becker was near Mr. Brackman's house during the murder, and that they can prove this through cell tower records. But what they haven't told you is that Ms. Becker lost her phone the night before and spent the day of the murder looking for it with Miss Taylor Perkins, her best friend. And they haven't told you that cell tower records place the cell phone in a wide area and are unreliable. The prosecution told you that it's Miss Becker in the Ring doorbell video footage, as the perpetrator is of her same size and build. But the perpetrator is masked, and there are likely thousands of people in the Denver metro area that fit that same description. One of those being Blair Rollins, another Colorado high school student whose father was a client of Mr. Brackman. Blair's father's in jail now and swore to get back at Mr. Brackman for losing his case. Blair Rollins was never investigated. You'll also hear that the Ring doorbell footage is incomplete, as there are other Ring videos that have been not examined. In addition, the prosecution claims they have text messages that implicate Miss Becker in the murder from Alex Cifuentes, a fellow mock trial student. But in fact, all they have are screenshots, which you'll hear can be easily manipulated, and that Blair Rollins and Alex Cifuentes were friends, which calls into question Alex Cifuentes' credibility. And Miss Becker will tell you she'd already lost her phone and would never text Alex Cifuentes, as they were rivals. So we know that evidence doesn't fit. How did the investigation quit? The investigation quit by corrupting and failing to collect key evidence. We don't have all the video footage, key evidence from Miss Becker's cell phone, or all the crime scene photos. And the investigation quit by jumping to conclusions. Detective Markowitz jumped to conclusions by only investigating one suspect and only conducting one interview. Detective Markowitz never attempted to corroborate Alex Cifuentes' testimony, failed to interview Miss Perkins, who was with Miss Becker during the day in question, and never investigated Miss Becker's alibi. Because of the lack of investigative work and Detective Markowitz's willingness to take the first possibility and make it the only one, many stones were left unturned. Finally, you will hear from Miss Becker espousing her innocence. You will hear Miss Perkins corroborate this claim and her alibi. And you will hear Professor Van Owen shed ample doubt on the prosecution's evidence. After closing arguments, you will have to make a decision. As explained in the second jury instruction, the prosecution has the burden of proof, meaning they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of all the elements necessary to constitute second-degree burglary and felony murder, those being 1, entering unlawfully into Mr. Brackman's home, and 2, killing him. They won't be able to prove these 2 elements, and that is because they won't be able to prove she knew where Mr. Brackman lived, and there's no evidence at the crime scene implicating her. No DNA, no hair, and no footprints. And if the prosecution can't prove she broke in, they can't prove that she murdered Mr. Brackman, thus not meeting their burden. Not meeting their burden means there's reasonable doubt. And since there will be reasonable doubt, I ask you, upon the conclusion of the trial, to find Ms. Becker not guilty on both counts. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Right. Are the people ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, we are.
All right, please call the first witness to the stand.
I would like to call Detective Markowitz to the stand. Hello, Detective Markowitz.
The witnesses have all, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. The witnesses have all been sworn. So you may proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, Detective Markowitz. I will be asking you a few questions today, if that's all right.
Yes.
Would you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
My name is Jordan Markowitz, Markowitz.
Okay. And are you currently employed?
Yes, I'm currently working with the Denver Police Department, or DPD, and I have been for the past 13 years.
And what types of cases do you work with?
I'm currently working with homicide cases.
And how many cases have you dealt with as a homicide detective?
Easily hundreds.
Have you received any special training as a homicide detective?
Yes, I've received tons of special training. I've learned so much about cell phone tower data and records and how to obtain them. I've learned about forensic software and how to download information, acquiring and interpreting cell phone tower records, and obtaining cell phone tower data.
And do you use this training regularly?
I use it constantly,
And how many cell phone cases have you worked with throughout your career?
easily over 50.
And have you ever testified as an expert witness before?
Yes, many times,
In what types of courts?
both federal as well as state,
And what states have you testified in?
mostly here in Colorado.
At this time, the prosecution moves to admit Detective Markowitz as an expert in the field of criminal homicide investigation and cell phone and cell tower analysis.
Any voir dire of the witness from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Detective Markowitz. My name is Benjamin Hawley. I'm one of Ms. Becker's lawyers and will be asking you a few questions today.
Good afternoon.
You provided a statement with your qualifications, correct?
That is correct.
But in that statement, it doesn't specify how long you've been a homicide detective, right?
Well, I've been a detective for the past 7 years, a homicide detective.
Sure, what I'm saying is in your statement, you use detective and homicide detective, right? So you don't specify how long you've been a homicide detective, right?
Correct.
And in that statement, you don't specify even how many homicide crime scenes you've investigated, right?
No, but if I've been a detective for the past 7 years, I've done quite a few cases.
Well, we don't know what you were a detective in, do we, from that statement? Right?
My statement says that I was a homicide detective.
A homicide detective and a detective, right?
I'm confused as to what you're asking.
I'm saying that in your statement, you talk about being a detective and a homicide detective. There's a distinction between the two, right?
Okay.
And you're trying to be put in as a homicide, being an expert in homicide crime scenes, correct?
Counsel, I am a homicide detective in crime scenes.
But you don't specify in your statement how many homicide crime scenes you've investigated. There's no number, right?
No, but I've been working as a homicide detective for a while now.
But that's a no. There is no number. You don't
There is no number,
Okay.
but I've been doing that for years.
So the only formal training in your entire statement you specify having received is a 3-day course on cell phone and forensic data recovery, correct?
Followed by thorough certification course.
So that's yes?
That is what is currently required. And so, yes, that was my training.
Thank you, Detective. Your Honor, we object to Detective Markowitz being admitted as an expert under Rule 706 for anything other than an expert in cell phone and forensic data recovery, as her statement does not provide adequate information as to her experience as a homicide detective, how many homicide crime scenes she's investigated. So she's not adequate to be admitted in that role.
And people, what is your response to the objection of this witness testifying as an expert in the area of homicide investigation?
As a homicide detective, you are required to visit multiple crime scenes. So the fact that she has been a homicide detective for multiple years clearly proves that she is qualified to be an expert in crimes in criminal homicide investigation.
Your Honor, may I quickly respond?
No, I'm going to rule that this witness can testify as an expert in cell phone recovery and cell phone information. I am less convinced that the area of expertise of a homicide detective is actually the subject of an expert opinion, as opposed to simply this officer's factual conduct, but I will permit her to testify as an expert in this area at this time. So plaintiff counsel, you may proceed with your direct examination of Detective Markowitz.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's talk about your involvement in this case. How are you assigned to this case?
I was assigned to this case on March 6th by my boss.
And where did this crime occur?
This crime occurred in Denver, Colorado.
And what was the date of the crime when it occurred?
This crime occurred on March 6th.
And did you ever visit this crime scene?
Yes, I did on the day of the crime.
And what time did you arrive at the crime scene?
2:20 in the afternoon.
And if anything, what did you observe when you first arrived at the scene?
Well, when I first arrived at the scene, the first thing that I noticed was the front door of the house was open. Just inside of the front door was the victim, face down on his floor in a pool of his own blood.
Were you able to identify the victim?
Yes, I was able to identify the body as Mackenzie Brackman.
Okay. And was there an autopsy performed in this case?
Yes, there was.
And was anyone else there on the scene after you arrived?
After I arrived, I had my forensic team come, so they arrived after I did.
And what did this forensic team do at the scene?
They did as they always do at the scene. I asked them to take photos of everything that was relevant to the case, and so that's what they did.
Your Honor, may I constructively show opposing counsel the witness that has been marked to the witness what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4?
Exhibit 4, all right. My understanding is that counsel all have copies of the exhibits. Is that correct? Yes. All right, you may proceed, counsel. You have, are you also asking the witness about Exhibit 4?
Yes.
You may proceed.
It's the exhibit up for you.
Yes, I have it in front of me.
What is Exhibit 4?
Exhibit 4 shows Mackenzie Brackman face down right inside of his front door with a visible stab marking in his upper left shoulder. And then his shirt is soaked in blood, and then there's a pool of blood surrounding his body.
And is this a true and accurate picture of Mackenzie Brackman's body when you first arrived on scene on March 6, 2020?
Yes, this is an accurate representation.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves for the admission of Exhibit 4. Its accuracy has been shown and authenticity stipulated to.
All right, counsel, any objection to the admission of Exhibit 4?
No objections at this time.
All right, Exhibit 4 is admitted.
Your Honor, may we publish the exhibit to the jury?
You may.
Once again, what does this picture depict?
This picture depicts Mackenzie Brackman on his floor, just inside of his front door, dead, with a stab marking in his upper left shoulder.
And did you observe any blood on the scene?
Yes, there was tons of blood on this scene. There was the blood surrounding his body, the blood soaking his shirt, blood drops, as well as blood spatter.
And what do these blood drops show?
The blood drops show the path from where he was stabbed to the path where he died.
And are there any photographs of this blood?
Unfortunately, some of our photos were corrupted, and the blood drops are some of the corrupted photos.
And is this the type of, what do you mean by corrupted?
I mean that currently they are unrecoverable, as far as I know.
Okay. Let's talk about your assessment of the scene. Do you know what ring security is?
Yes, and there was a ring security system at the residence.
Your Honor, may I show opposing counsel exhibits that have previously marked as 10, 12, and 13?
All right, 10, 12, and 13.
Yes, ma'am.
Counsel, if you do not have access to the exhibits, let me know. Otherwise, I will assume that you do have copies.
Have you been able to view this ring camera footage?
Yes, I obtained these when I went through his ring camera system, and then yes.
Okay. And is it the same person in each video?
Yes, and you can tell that by the exact same coverings. You can see that they have the same face mask on, the same gloves, and they are again fully covered.
And were there any physical similarities between the intruder in the video and anyone involved in this case?
Well, first of all, they have the approximate same size of body as the defendant, Avery Becker. And they also are wearing the mask, so you know that it's the same person in every single video.
Okay. And let's talk about how your investigation proceeded after you left this scene. Did you have any initial suspects after leaving?
After leaving, I did not have any specific people but I knew that a lead I would follow would be the mock trial team, since the victim was wearing a mock trial shirt that said "keep calm and mock on."
And did you reach out to any of the mock trial team?
Yes, I first reached out to Alex Fuentes.
Okay. And if anything, what did you learn from this, from Alex Fuentes?
From Alex Fuentes, I learned about Avery Becker, the defendant, and I learned about Avery's plans to go to the coach's house, and I learned about their interactions with each other and how they felt about each other.
Your Honor, may I constructively show opposing counsel what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14 for identification?
You may.
Detective Markowitz, do you recognize the document that's in front of you?
Yes, I do. These are the screenshots of Alex's conversation with Avery Becker.
Are these text messages accurate?
Yes, they are.
Complete?
Complete.
And truthful?
Very truthful.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to enter Exhibit 14 into evidence as its authenticity has been stipulated to and accuracy shown.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. We object under Rule 403, as Exhibit 14 is far more prejudicial than probative, as it asserts that Avery went to trash Brackman's house, even though the messages have not been verified as statements that Miss Avery Becker made. They are simply screenshots, and Detective Markowitz never verified their veracity.
I am going to allow the admission of Exhibit 14, subject to further cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Excuse me. So who were these text messages between?
These text messages were between Avery Becker, the defendant, and Alex Fuentes.
Okay. And what does Avery Becker say in these text messages?
Avery Becker discusses his anger with being kicked off the team, as well as going to Brackman's house to vandalize it.
And did you try and interview Avery Becker?
I did. However, unfortunately, a little bit before our interview, I was told by Avery's lawyer that I'm no longer allowed to contact Avery, and that all further contact must go through the lawyer, and that Avery would not be coming in for our interview.
And what, if any, investigation did you undertake of the defendant?
Sorry, you kind of cut out. Could you repeat the question?
Of course. What investigation, if any, did you undertake of the defendant?
I researched and obtained Avery Becker's cell phone tower records.
Okay. And what do these cell tower records show?
They show that Avery Becker, the defendant, was in the vicinity of Mackenzie Brackman's house on the day of the murder and around the time of the murder.
Okay. That is all my questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Detective Markowitz, let's start with evidence. No DNA evidence of Avery's was found at the crime scene, correct?
Because Avery was wearing gloves when he broke into the house and committed the murder.
I'm just asking if you didn't find any DNA evidence of Avery's, and you didn't, correct?
That is correct. I did not find any DNA evidence of Avery Becker's.
No hair follicles at the site, correct?
No, but in my ring videos, the victim or the defendant was wearing a hood as well as a mask.
I'm just asking about one thing, so if you could please try to keep just to the question, I'd appreciate that. No footprints as well, correct, were found at the crime scene?
That is correct. However, there were some scuff marks found at the crime scene.
Just talking about footprints, there were no footprints.
No footprints were found at the crime scene.
So let's talk about the photos that were taken of the crime scene. While at the crime scene, photos were taken of evidence, right?
Yes.
And some of those photos became corrupted.
Unfortunately, they were corrupted.
So some of the potential evidence was corrupted.
Yes, however, we have tons of other evidence that, again, points to Avery Becker as the murderer.
Well, you got a little bit away from my question again, so let me ask that again. So some of the potential evidence was corrupted, right?
That is correct.
I want to now talk about exhibits 10 through 13, about the Ring videos. You collected the Ring video footage, right?
That is correct. I obtained it from Brackman's phone and his account.
And the Ring doorbell videos show an intruder that is fully covered from head to toe, right?
Yes.
And because they're fully covered, we can't see any identifiable details about them except for their height and build, right?
Yes, which matches the defendant's, as well as we know that he was planning on going to the house that day from the text. So
I'm just
we can assume
asking.
that's Avery Becker.
I'm just asking if we can determine height and build, and that's all we can determine from the Ring videos.
Okay, that would be correct.
So based on the Ring videos, it could have been anyone of that height and build, right?
It could have, however, it also could have been the defendant who also murdered Avery or Mackenzie Brackman.
Just asking on the Ring videos, and it could have been anyone of that same height, right?
You are correct, counsel.
Even Blair Rollins, who was similar to Avery's height and build, correct?
Sure, but we don't have any evidence that Blair Rollins was planning on going to the house that day.
Just asking if Blair Rollins was the same height and build.
Okay, well, I've not seen Blair Rollins, so I cannot definitely clarify that for you, but sure, yes. Okay.
So you collected these videos, but in fact, there are many other videos on Brackman's phone that you didn't collect, right?
No, because those videos were not relevant to this case.
I'm just asking if there were other videos on Brackman's phone, and there were, right?
Because the camera picks up all motion, and so yes, there is of course motion.
So that's a yes.
That is a yes.
On to the call detail records. Your Honor, permission to present to the witness Exhibit 15.
Yes, you may present to the witness.
Thank you. And permission to screen share?
Yes. Well, not just with the witness at this point.
Okay. In fact, I won't even worry about it. In this Exhibit 15, there's a diagram of kind of the cell phone towers, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And those cell phone towers cover a wide area, right?
Yes.
And all the cell phone towers show is a potential place where a phone could have been, right?
Yes, and then it also shows at the time that the phone checked into that tower.
Exactly. And in one of those, there's Miss Avery Becker's house is covered in one of those towers, correct?
Yes, correct.
And in that same tower, Mr. Blair Rollins's house is also connected to, correct?
That would be correct.
On to your interview. You met with Alex Cifuentes, right?
That is correct. I did meet with Alex Cifuentes.
Your first interviewee, correct?
My very first interviewee for this case.
And the only interviewee, right?
Well, I had plans to meet with the defendant. However, that was canceled.
I'm just asking if it's the only person you interviewed.
Okay, you are correct.
You didn't interview other mock trial students, right?
No, I did not need to.
Just asking if you did.
Okay, you are correct.
Or Ms. Taylor Perkins, who was with Ms. Becker the day in question, right?
Correct.
Or other potential suspects.
Well, I didn't have any other potential suspects because all the evidence that I gathered for this case pointed to the defendant being the murderer.
I'm just asking that you never interviewed other potential suspects.
Okay, counsel, you are correct.
Like Blair Rollins, for example.
Correct. But yes. Okay, correct. Go on.
So this one interview with Alex Cifuentes, during that, they claimed they received text messages from Avery.
Yes, they did.
And they claimed that those text messages had threatened Mr. Brackman.
Yes, and they discussed plans to go to the house and vandalize it.
Just asking if there was text messages that threatened Brackman.
Okay, you are correct.
So you asked for Alex Cifuentes' phone,
Yes, I did.
and instead you got screenshots.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. No more questions.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness may step down. The people may call their next witness.
Your Honor, we would like to bring Alex Fuentes to the stand.
All right. And the witness is already sworn in. Do I have the witness on the screen?
I do not believe so.
All right, let's just hold on a second.
He's on the screen now.
All right. And then you may proceed with your examination of this witness.
Good evening, Mr. Cifuentes. My name is Aiden Phelps, and I'm here to ask you a few questions. Can you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Alex Cifuentes. Last name spelled S-I-F-U-E-N-T-E-S.
Mr. Cifuentes, do you know Avery Becker?
Yes, I do.
Would you consider him to be your friend?
Yes.
How would you describe him?
I would describe Avery as a very impulsive person.
Did this reflect how he went about doing mock trial?
Yes.
Did Avery Becker know Coach Brackman?
Yes.
How was their relationship?
It was not a good relationship, very argumentative.
Were you there the Tuesday night after regionals?
Yes, I was.
Did the defendant and Coach Brackman have any sort of altercation?
Yes.
Can you please expand a bit more on that?
Yes. The defendant, Avery Becker, and Coach Brackman had a large argument over Avery's lack of preparation for competition and how Avery never stuck to the script and brought the team down because of that.
After their altercation, did anything happen?
Yes.
What happened?
Avery stormed out of practice.
Was he carrying anything?
Yes, he was carrying a permanent marker.
And after he stormed out of practice, what did he do?
He went outside to the parking lot.
What did he do from there?
He wrote on Coach Brackman's Porsche.
What did he write on his Porsche?
He wrote Worst Attorney Award.
How did Coach Brackman, how did he react to this?
Coach Brackman was very angry and kicked Avery off of the team.
Did Avery seem visibly angry about this?
I did not see Avery at the time, but Avery had texted me and seemed very angry about it.
Did you have any interaction with the defendant after this altercation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to constructively show opposing counsel what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14 for identification. May my technician please display Exhibit 14?
To the witness, yes.
Is it up on screen?
I am not seeing it, but perhaps the witness is.
I cannot see it.
There we go. Thank you. So Avery asked you to ask Coach Brackman and bring him back on the team. Did you do this?
Yes, I had talked to Coach Brackman.
Did Coach Brackman let him back on the team?
No, he did not.
And during the last portion of these text messages, Avery said what he said was, well, if he's still upset about his car, then he's going to be real upset about when he sees what I do to his house. Did you take this seriously at all?
Sorry, was there an objection there?
Yes, sorry. Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Zach, shoot. Alex Fuentes, did you take this seriously at all?
At first, yes.
If you thought he was really going to break into his house and trash it, why did you not alert anyone about this?
Well, when I talked to Avery at the Fry Shack, it seemed that Avery had calmed down a little bit. In fact, Avery even let me play a few games on his phone.
And after this, after you played the games, what happened?
I played the games on Avery's phone, and then Avery and Taylor left the Fry Shack.
Okay. And knowing the witness, knowing the defendant and his behavior after being kicked off the mock trial team, do you think he is capable of committing violence?
Yes, I do.
And I know this is very hard for you to testify against a good friend of yours, but what brought you to do so today?
I believe in everybody knowing the truth and the whole truth. So I'm here testifying against Avery Becker because I believe that Avery murdered Coach Brackman.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, and you may take down the exhibit. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I have a time check?
I'm not who.
For me, you have 10 minutes and 42 seconds left.
That's the same with me as well. Okay, thank you. Let's talk about your relationship with Avery Becker. You say that you two were friends, correct?
Yes, very good friends.
You say best friends?
Yeah.
Isn't it typical that best friends spend time outside of school together?
Yes, but as we had mock trial together, we had spent time through that.
So the only place you two hung out was at mock trial practice?
Yes.
Correct? You never went to her house?
That is not my statement. Would you like me to answer that?
Yes.
I had gone to the house a few times and hung out with Avery.
Okay. However, you mainly hung out at mock trial practices, correct?
Again, that is not my statement. Would you like me to answer that?
I'll move on to my next question. You say that you two were some of the best members on the team, right?
Yes, we were the best.
Although Avery was often given the better roles.
Yes.
It bothered you, didn't it?
Yes, I felt like it was a little unfair.
And she always won the awards.
Avery did win the awards because Coach Brackman gave her the better parts.
And you said this felt like a slap on the face, correct?
Yes.
So you were bitter because you weren't getting the same credit.
I was a little angry that I didn't get the credit for my roles.
And with Avery off the team, you were excited because you would have a larger role with her gone.
Yes, I mean, if you are the best on the team or in Coach Brackman's case, the second best, if the best leaves, then you would be excited to get the best roles, wouldn't you?
So you were excited, correct?
I mean, yes.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to talk about your interactions with the police. You got a call from Detective Markowitz, right?
Yes, I did.
And on that call, he said he wanted to have a meeting with you?
Yes.
So you two agreed and you set up a meeting?
Yes.
And the purpose of this meeting was to show him text messages?
It was to just interview me about the case.
So for this meeting, you were going to show him text messages, though. You had mentioned that you had received.
Yes.
So you had to bring your phone, correct?
I did.
And your phone was getting old, so you set it down to charge.
Yes.
So you'd be able to show your phone to the detective.
Yes.
And then you never actually brought your phone to the meeting.
Well, my dad and I were in a rush out of the house, and he called me downstairs, and we rushed out of the house. And at the time, I had forgotten my phone at home.
Okay. And once you were at the meeting with the detective, he never asked to see your phone,
He did.
but you could not show it to him.
I could not.
And so you never showed the text on your phone to the police.
No, I offered to bring my phone back for another interview, but Detective Markowitz told me screenshots of the text messages would be fine.
So the police, as you said, accepted your screenshots as legitimate messages.
Yes, he told me to send him screenshots.
And you no longer have this phone.
No, I do not.
Thank you. Now I'd like to talk about the night Avery was kicked off of the team. You say that you saw her at the Fry Shack.
Yes,
You two talked and you were playing a game on her phone.
I did.
And this was right before she and Taylor left.
Yeah.
And you were aware the next day Avery's phone went missing.
I was not aware that Avery's phone went missing. All I knew was Avery was not at school that day.
But the next day, Avery's phone did go missing, correct?
I had no aware of that, but as my lawyers have told me, I am now aware that Avery's phone did go missing the next day.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness may step down. The people may call their next witness.
Your Honor, prosecution calls forth Kyle Kuzak to the witness stand.
All right, the witness is already sworn in, and once we're sure that their screen is up, then you may begin your direct examination.
All right, I see the screen.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Kuzak, my name is Sam Wolper, and I'd like to ask you a few questions today. Are you all right with that?
Yes.
All right. Would you please state your full name and spell it for the record, please?
Kyle Kuzak, Kuzak.
Are you currently employed?
Yes.
What is your current employment?
I'm currently a crime scene reconstruction investigator for the Denver Police Department.
What does a crime scene reconstructor do?
A crime scene reconstructor assists detectives in visualizing what happened or occurred during the crime.
How are you qualified to do that?
I've been a crime scene reconstruction investigator for 19 years. In addition, I am certified.
What training do you undertake to do this, to acquire this job?
The certification that I have included some training. In addition, I am very experienced.
What type of crimes do you work with in your job?
I work with various property crimes, in addition with various violent crimes.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to enter Kyle Kuzak as an expert witness under the rules of 702 in the field of crime scene reconstruction, as he has showed the correct skills, knowledge, education, experience, and training needed to be qualified in this field.
Any objection to admitting this witness as an expert in the area of crime scene reconstruction?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness will be permitted to testify as an expert in that area.
Thank you. All right. What is your relationship to this case, Mr. Kuzak?
I was assigned to reconstruct the crime that occurred in this case.
What does an assignment to this case entail?
An assignment entails me reviewing all the evidence, visiting the scene, looking at interviews, and analyzing the evidence.
What would a crime scene reconstruction tell us about this crime?
A crime scene reconstruction would tell us how the crime occurred, which can be a key part in the investigation of some crimes, and also can help the jury visualize what happened.
How do you form your opinion?
I form my opinion through a 5-step process.
Is there a methodology to this?
Yes. I approach my work in 5 parts. These parts are recognition and documentation, collection of evidence, evaluation of evidence, and hypothesis and testing, and then reconstruction.
What happens in step 1 of your process?
In my first step, I create a witness tracking spreadsheet and a physical evidence tracking spreadsheet. In addition, I create a rudimentary flow chart to show relationships between various pieces of evidence and witnesses.
What would that include for this crime?
For this crime, the witness tracking spreadsheet included various members of the Colorado High School mock trial team, the the victim's neighbor who called 911, the responding EMT, and in addition, the responding crime scene technician.
What happens in step 2 of your process?
In step 2 of my process, I expand the additional organizational framework for my information, which is just pretty much expanding my evidence and then preparing my evidence for analysis.
Then step 3?
Step 3 is pretty much more of what step 2 is.
What about step 4?
And step 4 is when I actually conduct my analysis of the evidence. In this step, I use the Bevel and Gardner approach, 7-step methodology.
And lastly, step 5, Mr. Cusack?
In step 5, I create my initial report, and then I get this report peer reviewed. I then edit the report, and then I submit my final report.
Well, so through these 5 steps, what did you conclude about this case?
I concluded that this was a premeditated home invasion gone wrong.
All right. Prosecution, we would like to show the witness exhibit 10, 12, and 13. Is that all right?
You may. At 10, 12, and 13, those are the videos. They have been shown, but not admitted as of this point in time.
All right. Have you reviewed the ring footage of this case, Mr.
Yes.
Cusack? All right. Do you recognize it?
I do.
How do you know it came from the house?
I know it came from the house as the investigators retrieved the ring video footage from Mr. Brackman's account, which was associated with his home.
All right. Your Honor, the prosecution moves for submission of exhibit 10, 12, and 13 into evidence as it actually has been shown and authenticity stipulated.
Any objection to the admission of these 3 exhibits?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Exhibits 10, 12, and 13 are admitted.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Cusack, what do these ring videos show?
The ring video shows the perpetrator approaching the house. The perpetrator is about the same size and build of the defendant today. The perpetrator approaches the house, checks the front door. They cannot enter through the front door, so they move through the backyard and open the back door and enter the home through there.
All right. Let us move on to the murder weapon. The prosecution will also like to show the witness exhibit 5.
Right. You may show the witness exhibit 5 for identification.
Do you have it?
I'm pulling it up right now. Okay, I'm good.
All right. Do you recognize this photo?
I do.
How do you know it came from the house?
The investigators retrieved this knife from the side of the victim, and this we know that this knife came from the house, as there is a knife block with a missing chef's knife, as this is also a chef's knife. However, they are different styles, but it would not be unreasonable to assume that somebody would replace the a broken or lost knife with a similar size knife like this one in the knife block.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution moves to enter exhibit 5 into evidence as its accuracy has been shown and authenticity stipulated.
Any objection to the admission of the photograph exhibit 5?
No objections, Your Honor.
Right. Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Thank you. Mr. Cusack, what is the murder weapon in this crime?
The murder weapon is a Chicago cutlery chef's knife.
Where did this weapon come from?
Based on my analysis of the case, the weapon came from the knife block in the victim's kitchen. The knife block was missing a chef's knife, which is about the same dimensions of the murder weapon. So it would have fit in there. And like I said earlier, it would not be unreasonable to assume that the victim or whoever lived in the house with the victim would have replaced the knife if the original one was lost or damaged.
All right. Now I'd like to move on to the scuff marks. May I also show the witness exhibit 18?
You may show the witness 18.
Do you see it?
I do, counsel.
All right. Do you recognize this photo?
I do.
How do you know it also came from the house of the crime?
The investigators took this photo when they arrived at the home.
All right. Your Honor, the prosecution moves for submission of Exhibit 18 into evidence as its accuracy has been shown and authenticity stipulated.
Sorry. Any objection to the admission of Exhibit 18 photograph?
Yes, Your Honor, the opposing counsel has not laid appropriate foundation as to how these scuff marks are relevant to the case.
All right. Response?
I've laid proper foundation as this is evidence that's come from the house. And just like the ring videos, this is just as important.
I'm going to admit this exhibit based on the testimony of the witness that the photograph was taken close in time to the events of this case. So Exhibit 18 is admitted.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kuzak, can you tell us about the scuff marks found at the victim's residence?
Yes, so the scuff marks were found just inside the kitchen by the back door. These scuff marks indicate a struggle that occurred after the victim had entered, or after the perpetrator had entered the home. Yeah.
What other evidence points towards a struggle?
In addition to the scuff marks, there was a broken plate found by the kitchen table, which is about 5 feet from the back door.
All right. What about the fingerprints and DNA you gathered in this case?
All the DNA and blood and other just DNA belong to the victim, which is consistent with the fact that the perpetrator was wearing a mask, hood, and gloves.
All right. Mr. Kuzak, have you heard the defense's conclusion of this case?
Yes.
What do you think of Mr. Van Owen's theory?
Frankly, I think that Mr. Van Owen's theory is stupid.
Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Van Owen's theory is beyond the scope of this witness's expertise, as he has only been qualified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction.
Response? Since I haven't heard from the other expert, I don't know his area, but what is the response? Does it have to do with crime scene reconstruction?
Well, it's all right. No further questions.
All right. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, may I request a time check?
Certainly.
I have 6:51.
And I have 7 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Kuzak, you mentioned how the scuff marks found on the kitchen floor indicate a struggle between two individuals, correct?
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that you can't carbon date scuff marks, can you?
This is not my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Well, in your 19 years as a crime scene reconstruction expert, have you ever carbon dated scuff marks?
Like I said before, this is not my statement. Would you like me to answer?
So as a crime scene reconstruction expert, you're unaware if there is a way to carbon date scuff marks?
I'm aware of the answer, but this is not my statement. Would you like me to answer?
Yes, what is the answer, Mr. Kuzak?
So, scuff marks cannot be carbon dated, but it is a very reasonable assumption that these scuff marks were created during the struggle between Mackenzie Brackman and the defendant.
So just to be clear, you do not know for certain when these scuff marks were made?
I do not.
So if you don't know when these scuff marks were made, they could have been made a week before the murder.
They could have, but it is not likely.
Even a month before the murder.
Same answer.
Even a year prior to the murder.
Same answer. It is not likely, but it is possible.
So you may speculate on the time that these scuff marks were made, but there is no scientific way for you to date these scuff marks.
No.
All right. Looking at exhibits 4 and 5 that have previously been admitted into evidence, Your Honor, may my co-counsel share these exhibits?
Yes, they have already been admitted.
You reviewed all the police reports, photographs of the scene, and the footage to form your theory. Am I correct?
Yes.
If you take a look at exhibit 5, well, first let me clarify your theory. You propose that Mr. Brackman was killed by pulling out the knife and following that bleeding to death. Correct, Mr. Kuzak?
My theory is that the perpetrator stabbed Mr. Brackman, exited through the front door. Mr. Brackman then began to move toward the front door, pulled out the knife, and then died.
Yes, you say that he clearly pulled out the knife himself.
Yes.
Now let's take a look at the knife in Exhibit 5. As you can see, there's clearly blood on the handle, correct?
Yes.
Now let's take a look at Mr. Brackman again in Exhibit 4. There is not any blood on his hands, is there?
I believe that this photo is not sufficient to tell if there is blood on the hands, as it only has the back of the hands, and if you hold the knife, you hold it with the front of your hands.
But Mr. Kuzak, you reviewed the autopsy report too, didn't you?
Yes.
And in that autopsy report, there was no mention of blood on Mr. Brackman's hands.
There is no mention of it.
And there's no blood on his hands in Exhibit 4.
There is no blood on the back of his hands.
Yes, there's no visible blood in this evidence that you
There is no
are.
visible blood.
Okay, so Exhibits 4, 5 in the autopsy report do not show or support your theory that Mr. Blackman would have blood on his hands.
They do not support my theory, but they also do not contradict my theory.
They don't contradict your theory. How does one pull out a bloody knife, get blood on the handle, but not on his hands?
Like I said before, there is no blood on the back of his hands. However, you hold the knife with the front of your hands.
Mr. Kuzak, the evidence and theory just don't add up, do they?
I think they do.
Okay, moving on. You mentioned that you were able to view the size and build of the perpetrator in the Ring doorbell footage.
Yes.
But isn't it true that there are hundreds of people with the same build as the perpetrator?
I presume so.
Even thousands of people with that same build.
I presume so as well, yes.
And to make matters even worse, the perpetrator was masked, weren't they?
Yes.
So you have no picture or facial recognition of the perpetrator.
We do not.
You recovered no fingerprints at the scene.
We did not, but that is consistent with the fact that the perpetrator was wearing gloves.
So was that a yes or a no? Fingerprints or no?
There were fingerprints, however, they were the victim's fingerprints. But that is, like I said, consistent with the fact that the the perpetrator was wearing gloves, excuse me.
Thank you for clearing that for me. There was no DNA evidence found at the scene either.
The only blood and fingerprints found at the scene were the victims.
So, in conclusion, there was no biological evidence found at the scene that placed Miss Becker there.
There is no, but this is consistent with the fact that the perpetrator was wearing gloves.
So you rendered this opinion without any evidence placing her at the scene.
I did not render the opinion that Avery Becker committed this murder. My job is to reconstruct the crime scene.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzak. No further questions.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness may step down. Do the people have any additional witnesses that they wish to call at this time?
No, Your Honor.
All right, do the people rest?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, defense, would you like to call any witnesses at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Miss Avery Becker to the stand.
All right, the witness is already sworn in. Any additional advisements for a defendant have also, we will assume, have been given outside the presence of the jury, and you may proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Miss Becker. Could you please introduce yourself and spell your last name?
My name is Avery Becker, Becker.
Miss Becker, let's first talk about mock trial. How long were you on the team?
I participated in mock trial for all 4 years of high school. I was on the A team.
Why did you initially join mock trial?
I joined with my best friend, Taylor Perkins. We joined as a fun way to get out of the house, and it gave time for us to hang out during practice.
So for your senior year, did you have any hopes for the season?
Yes, I was looking forward to the regional and state tournaments. I thought I had a good chance of winning the Best Attorney in the State award because I was really good at crosses and closings.
Who was your team's sponsor?
Mackenzie Brackman.
How would you describe your relationship with Mr. Brackman?
Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, but he always gave me good roles, and I appreciated him for that.
Let's talk about the regional competition. How did you and your team do?
I won Best Attorney at Regionals Award and was also named Best Closer, and my team advanced to state. It was very exciting.
How did Mr. Brackman react to your success?
Well, on practice that Tuesday night, I was writing up at the whiteboard the good things we had and bad things we had done at regionals, and that's when Mr. Brackman started going after me.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, he was going after me. I don't want to get into the specifics of it, but he said some pretty hurtful things to me, and I said some things in reply.
What did you say back to Mr. Brackman?
I called him the worst coach in the state.
Did you mean that?
No, I did not. And I know it isn't true. In fairness, despite our differences, Mr. Brackman got us to a place where we were competitive. He figured out how to get my team to the top, and I give him credit for that.
What happened after this back and forth between you and Mr. Brackman?
Well, I was upset and I walked out of practice. I still had the marker from the whiteboard in my hand, and that is when I did something that I still regret to this day and is the worst thing I have ever done. I took the whiteboard marker and wrote Worst Attorney Award on Mr. Brackman's car. It is the worst and most immature thing I have ever done, and I felt so awful about it, especially when I later learned it was a permanent marker, not a whiteboard marker.
So after writing Worst Attorney Award on Mr. Brackman's car, what happened?
Mr. Brackman came up behind me and he started to apologize to me, but he kicked me off the team when he saw what I had done to his car.
How did that make you feel?
I was very upset, but I went home and I talked to my mom and she cooled me down. While I didn't tell her everything because I felt so terrible about what I had done, she made me realize the mistake I had made, and I felt so terrible and wanted to make amends.
Well, let's talk about that. How did you try to make amends with Mr. Brackman?
The next day, I went to Mr. Brackman's office, but he wouldn't see me.
After Mr. Brackman refused to meet with you, what did you do then?
I really wanted to apologize in person, but I realized I might not be able to do that. So I sent him a text saying how sorry I was. And I felt so bad. I was really sorry. I told him that I thought it was a whiteboard marker and would wipe right off, just like when you clean a whiteboard. I also offered to scrub his car to get all the marker off and to get a summer job to help pay to get the car repainted. I finally told him that I would work really hard to help our team win state.
Did Mr. Brackman ever respond?
No, he did not.
How did that make you feel?
I was devastated. I really wanted to apologize to him, but I never got a chance to apologize in person because, well, you know.
On to the day where the police claim you killed Mr. Brackman. Where were you?
To understand where I was that day, you have to understand what happened the day before.
Okay, what happened the day before?
Taylor and I went to Fry Shack, the local burger place where everyone from CHS goes after school.
Who else was at Fry Shack besides you and Taylor?
I remember seeing a lot of other CHS mockers there, including Alex Cifuentes.
Who's Alex Cifuentes? Alex
Cifuentes was a fellow mock trial member. He pretends we are friends, but I'm not sure why, as we have never gotten along.
What were you doing at Fry Shack?
We were playing games on our phones, and then we went to the mall and walked around before going home.
Now let's talk about the day Mr. Brackman was killed. What were you doing that day?
I woke up that day and I couldn't find my phone anywhere. I kept trying to think of the last time I was using it. And the last time I remembered using it was when Taylor and I were playing games at Fry Shack.
So what did you do after you realized your phone was missing?
I went to Taylor's house and we decided to skip school to go look for my phone.
What did you do next?
We went to the mall and looked all over for my phone. We even went to Fry Shack.
Could you find it?
It was nowhere to be found. We kept using Taylor's phone to call it, but we could never find it. We called it so many times. We figured that it was dead or stolen as it immediately would go to voicemail.
Alex Cifuentes claims you texted on March 6th to him that you were going to trash Brackman's house. did you?
There was no way I could have, as I did not have my phone. It was lost. Also, Alex would be the absolute last person I would text for anything because we were rivals.
On March 6th, the day of the murder, what were your feelings about mock trial?
I really wanted to get back on the team and was hoping that Mr. Brackman would change his mind.
What say you to the accusation that you're the same size and build as the person in the Ring videos?
I get that. I am the same general size and build, but it could not have been me as I was looking for my phone with Taylor that day. Also, my lawyers showed me the videos and the person's face is covered. While I am that general size and build, so are a lot of people, so it could really be anyone.
Who else is a similar size and build to you?
Blair Rollins is my same general size and build. When we were walking away from someone, you could confuse the two of us.
Wait, who's Blair Rollins?
They went to my high school. Their dad is in jail, and Mr. Brackman was their dad's attorney.
Were you the person that broke into Mr. Brackman's house, Miss Becker?
No, I was not.
Were you the person who murdered Mr. Brackman?
Again, I was not.
What have you done to Mr. Brackman, Miss Becker?
All I did to Mr. Brackman was write on his car with a marker. And again, this is the worst thing I've ever done, and I still feel awful about it. I would never, ever murder or break into Mr. Brackman's house.
Thank you so much. No more questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. All right. May I proceed?
You may.
All right. Avery Becker, my name is Sam Wolpert. Can I ask you a few questions today?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Mrs. Becker, would you say that you're good at mock trial?
Yes.
You would say that you're the most important player to your team.
Well, I felt like I was really important to my team because Mr. Brackman always gave me good rules to help my team, and I was also able to win a lot of awards, so that backed up my position on the team.
Well, would you say that you're better than, say, Alex Cifuentes?
Well, I actually won the awards. Well, they did not, so by that logic, I am better, yes.
Therefore, you would say that you're the most important player on your team.
Yes.
All right. You thought that you were better than Brackman.
Well, I thought I had a natural skill that he did not. So in that way, I was better, but he was the coach on our team and got our whole team to a place where we were competitive and we could win. So I appreciated that.
Because Brackman was jealous of you.
I think I had a natural skill that he did not. So in that way, perhaps, yes, he was jealous of me.
He was jealous of your genius and talent.
Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation. Avery does not know what or what not Mr. Brackman was thinking.
Sustained.
All right, I'll move on, Your Honor. Did you ever think to help your other teammates by writing written questions, Mrs. Becker?
Well, I felt like I didn't need to write out my whole cross-examination, all my questions, because I felt I would do better making it up on the spot. That was the best way I worked. And so in a way, I was helping my team by doing it my best so that we could win and advance the state.
Because your way was the best way.
For me, it was the best way. I felt like it was the best way I could do at mock trial. Yes.
Better than Brackman's way of doing things.
Well, he wanted to write everything out for us, and I didn't think that that was the way we could learn to do it for ourselves. If your coach does everything for you, how are we going to learn? So that's why I thought that it was better if we did it by ourselves than the way Mr. Brackman thought.
Now, you're an impulsive type of person, aren't you?
I don't know if I would say that.
Well, it certainly would, because that would contribute to your success in mock trial.
I could make stuff up on the spot in mock trial. That is true, but I'm not sure if it translated to all parts of my personality.
Would you agree that you're a creature of instinct?
I don't know how I would describe myself per se.
All right. Is your impulsiveness what made you vandalize Brackman's car?
Again, I'm not sure if I would personally say that I'm impulsive. What made me vandalize, as you say, Brackman's car is that, first of all, I thought it was a dry erase marker, so I wouldn't call it vandalism because I thought it would wipe right off. And I was upset in the moment. I was embarrassed. He was going after me in front of my whole team.
Well,
so it was just, I was so upset.
that was still an impulse.
I'm sorry, there's an objection. State your objection.
Counsel's interrupting my witness.
All right. Counsel and witness, just please pause and wait for each person to either finish the question or finish the answer, but you may continue with the cross-examination.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Becker, would you say that this nature of yours to think up things on the fly and be impulsive in that way could lead to your emotions overtaking your logical reasoning?
No, I wouldn't say that. I said,
I'm sorry, what is the objection?
Sorry, Your Honor. Objection to argumentative, impulsive.
Overruled. Witness may answer the question.
no, I wouldn't say that. I would say that I was good at making things up on the spot for mock trial, but I wasn't an impulsive person. I knew how to control myself in other areas. It wasn't my personality. It was just something that I worked well at mock trial.
Well, your impulsive nature certainly overcame your logical reasoning when you vandalized Mr. Brackman's car.
I wouldn't say it's an impulsive nature. I would say I was upset. And that's how I took my embarrassment and my disappointment for him not being happy with me out at the moment. And it was just an immature thing to do. And I feel so regretful for it. It was awful. But I wouldn't say my impulsive nature overtook me because I don't know if I have an impulsive nature. I wouldn't exactly say that.
Well, it also happened when you purposely didn't tell your own mother, whom you trust with everything, your vandalization of Brackman's car.
I would actually say that's the opposite of impulsivity. It's the ability to hold back things that you would say, like I wasn't impulsive by not telling her because I was embarrassed. So I was able to hold something back, which is actually the opposite of impulsivity.
But you still didn't tell your mother, right?
I felt terrible about it. I was embarrassed. So I really didn't want her to know about it. So I did not tell her, yes.
All right. As well as when you would get Brackman if it was the last thing you did. That was another example of your impulsive nature, though.
That was something I said to express my disappointment and my anger in the moment, but my mom was able to calm me down, and I realized the bad mistake I had made. So it was just something I said to get my emotions out in the moment.
All right. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Redirect.
Your Honor, thank you.
I'm sorry, you said no to redirect? Sorry.
Yes, Your Honor, sorry.
All right. Does defense have any additional witnesses that they wish to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
All right. The witness is already sworn in, and you may proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you. Could you please state your name for us?
Taylor Perkins.
And what's your relationship to Avery Becker?
Oh, Avery is my best friend.
How long have you two been friends?
Oh, we've been friends for forever. I even decided to do mock trials so that I could hang out with Avery. We'd have something to do outside of school. It just really sounded fun.
Let's talk a little bit about mock trial. How did you feel about mock trial?
To me, mock trial was okay. Avery was definitely the better one at it.
Did you observe Avery and Mr. Brackman's relationship during mock trial?
Yes.
Could you describe that relationship?
Their relationship has always been pretty tense because Mr. Brackman had a disagreement with Avery on style choices, and he actually ended up demoting her to B team because of it.
When Avery was demoted to B team, how did you feel?
You know, it made me a little upset because Avery deserved to be on A team.
And what did you do after she was demoted?
Before regionals, I decided to step down in support of Avery.
What happened after?
After, Avery was let back on the team and they went to regionals, and she even won a bunch of awards for all her work.
Now, let's talk about what happened after regionals. Were there any other instances that demonstrate Avery and Mr. Brackman's relationship?
Yes, one night when Mr. Brackman was addressing Avery's awards, it got pretty heated.
Could you describe this incident?
Well, Avery called me in complete disarray about the whole event after it happened. She thought that she had grabbed a dry erase marker, not a permanent marker. She didn't plan to write on Brackman's car. She was just so flustered.
And what happened afterward?
After, Avery was kicked off the team.
Did you two do anything together?
We hung out to try to get her mind off of it.
Where did you two go?
We decided to head over to the Fry Shack to drown our sorrows in Greece.
And remind us, what is the Fry Shack?
The Fry Shack's just a burger place that a bunch of kids from high school go to eat and hang out.
And when you walked into the Fry Shack, who did you see?
There were actually a bunch of people from mock trial there.
And what was it like seeing your old teammates?
You know, I mean, there was definitely some awkwardness in the air, but mostly everyone seemed supportive towards Avery.
You say mostly. Who did not seem supportive?
Well, Alex seemed almost sincere, but in my experience, Alex has a way of being pretty passive-aggressive.
Who's Alex?
Alex Fuentes was on the mock trial team with us when we were seniors. Alex was a junior.
And what was your relationship with Alex like?
We weren't friends at all.
What about Alex and Avery?
Oh, you know, they've always kind of been rivals because Avery always gets the better roles than Alex.
We'll get back to talking about Alex again in a moment. Now, I want to talk to you about a student named Blair Rollins. Do you know Blair?
Yes.
Who is Blair Rollins?
Blair's a student at our school. Blair wasn't a part of mock trial, though.
And was there any relationship between Blair and Alex?
Blair and Alex were friends.
Does Blair Rollins have any particular reputation at CHS?
Oh yeah, everyone knows Blair Rollins. Blair had the reputation of hating Brackman because Brackman lost a case that sent Blair's dad to jail.
All right, thank you. Now, I'd like to talk more about the night Avery was kicked off the team. You say you were at the Fry Shack, and what was Alex doing?
Alex came over to talk to us.
And what happened next?
Avery seemed pretty upset and stormed off to the bathroom.
Did you notice anything unusual when she left?
Yeah, she left her phone on the table, which was pretty out of the ordinary for her. She must have been really upset.
And where were you while Avery was in the bathroom?
I was at the table.
And where was Alex?
Alex was also at the table.
What was Alex doing?
Alex just kept talking to me about Mr. Brackman and just really lingering around the table where Avery's phone was.
How long were you two talking?
You know, we were talking for a while because Alex just wouldn't leave the table. It made me feel really weird because Alex isn't friends with either of us.
What happened after Avery finally came back?
We decided to head out for the night.
And where was Alex when you left the Fry Shack?
Alex was still at the table.
And where was the last place you remember seeing Avery's phone?
Also at the table.
I'd like to talk about the next day, the day of the murder. What happened then?
Well, the next morning, Avery realized that her phone was missing, so I suggested that we go look for it.
And where did you two go looking for her phone?
Well, the last place I remember seeing her phone was on the table at the Fry Shack, so obviously we went there.
Did you ever find Avery's phone?
No, we never found her phone, and we looked everywhere for it. We spent the entire day looking for it, and we just couldn't find it.
Based on your knowledge, what do you think happened to Avery's phone?
I mean, the last place I remember seeing Avery's phone was was at the table where Alex was. So the only thing I can think of is that Alex took it.
And one more time, Miss Perkins, you were with Avery the entire day of the murder.
Yes, we spent the entire day looking for the phone and we could not find it.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Thank you. Let's start with your relationship to Avery Becker. As a best friend, you would say that, or are you and Avery best friends?
Oh, absolutely. We're the best of friends.
Okay. And as a best friend, you would say she's often rash?
You know, she's rash sometimes, but she knows her
Mhm.
limits and she knows how to calm down pretty
Is
well.
that a yes to my question?
Yeah,
Okay. And has an inflated ego?
sometimes, yeah.
Okay. And you would say that Avery drove Brackman crazy, right?
Sorry?
You would say that Avery drove Brackman crazy, right?
I would because of their disagreements in styles.
And to the extent that Avery was actually demoted from the A team, right?
Yeah, she was demoted from B team because of her style.
And this upset her, right?
I think it would upset anyone.
Okay. So upset that she actually decided to write worst attorney award on Coach Brackman's car.
I mean, I don't really know her thought process of that event.
Okay. And this ruined the paint on the car, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And Avery tried to get back on the team after, but Brackman was not having any of it, was he?
She begged him and tried to apologize so many times, and he just wouldn't.
Okay. And Avery even showed up to practice on March 5th, but was asked to leave.
Yeah, he was really not having it with her.
And this was the night before Brackman was murdered.
I suppose so.
Okay. That night, you and Avery went to the Fry Shack, right?
Yeah, that's where we saw all of the mock trialers.
Okay. And when the mock trialers came, Avery got really upset and stormed off to the bathroom.
Yeah, she got upset because of Alex's presence at the table.
And you think that the phone was still on the table, but you don't actually know, do you?
I know that's the last place I remember seeing it.
Okay, but you're not sure that you saw it there. That was the last place, right? You think that that's where that last place that you saw it.
I do think that that's where I saw it.
Okay. And on March 6th, the day after, you realized that the phone was missing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the two of you went to look for the phone.
Yeah, we spent the entire day looking for it together.
And that was skipping school, right?
Yeah, because we were looking for the phone the entire day.
And you searched everywhere you went, including the mall?
Yep.
And then the Fry Shack that you were at the night before?
Yep.
And you saw the mock trial team there, right?
We did.
And knowing that he's dead, that Coach Brackman was dead the entire time, was just creepy to you?
It was really creepy. I mean, you never expect.
Okay. And you never found Avery Becker's phone?
I think there's an objection there. Was it interruption?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So just a reminder again to counsel and to the witness. Counsel, wait for the witness to finish their statement before you ask the next question. Witness, wait for the counsel to finish their question before you begin to answer. So counsel, I don't know if you want to repeat that last question or go on to the next, but you may continue.
I'll go on to the next. Thank you, Your Honor. You never found Avery Becker's phone, right?
No, we kept calling and texting it with no answer, and we never found it.
And that thing was like a third kidney to Avery?
That's why we were looking for it, yeah.
But neither of you remembered to try and locate the phone, right?
I mean, I have an Android, so I'm not really savvy with Apple products. So it's really out of my realm, and I guess I just didn't remember.
Did you ever try to locate the phone?
No, because I have an Android, so I
Okay.
don't remember.
Your
You
Honor,
mentioned a couple.
Sorry, objection to interruption again. The lawyer is continuing to interrupt the witness while she is talking.
Right. And sustained, just a reminder, slow down everyone. Continue.
You mentioned a couple of other names during direct examination. You mentioned Alex Cifuentes, right?
Yeah.
You thought that Alex took Avery's phone, didn't you?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm. And you and Alex don't get along.
I mean, we weren't friends. I wouldn't say we don't get along.
You thought that Alex was insincere?
Yeah, I do think that.
And you thought that Alex was trying to get your best friend Avery's roles?
I just think that Avery always got the better roles.
Okay, and you thought that Alex was a total kiss up?
I do think that he kissed up to Mr. Brackman.
You wanted to punch him in the face, didn't you?
Yeah, that's when we were at the Fry Shack and Avery was really upset and stormed off, and Alex
Excuse
just
me,
kept.
is that a yes to my question?
let the witness finish their answer. So, witness, you may finish your answer.
That was when we were at the Fry Shack and Avery stormed off to the bathroom really upset, and Alex just kept lingering around our table.
But you never saw him take this phone, did you?
No.
Okay. And you said that Alex took the phone and gave it to Blair Rollins?
That's what I assume happened, yes.
And you say that Blair Rollins killed Mackenzie Brackman?
That is what I assume.
And this makes sense because Blair Rollins and Alex are friends?
No, it makes sense because Blair hated Brackman.
And Blair is the kid who everyone thinks is a little weird, right?
Yeah, most likely to be a sociopath, actually, is what most people say.
And even you know that this sounds like a stretch, don't you?
I don't know if it's necessarily a stretch. I think it's an option.
And you didn't even think about this option until the lawyers called you to testify here today, Avery's lawyers?
I mean, I don't try to think about people who kill other people every day, no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No redirect necessary. Thank you.
All right. Does defense have any additional witnesses that they wish to call?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Professor Van Owen.
The witness is already sworn in, and so as soon as they are available, then you may begin your direct examination.
Are you ready, Ms. Van Owen?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Would you please state your name for the record?
Good afternoon. I am Professor Blake Van Owen.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a private investigator as well as a professor.
What do you teach?
I received my master's degree in criminal justice through Ashford University, and I've previously taught a class on police procedures at the Community College of the Rockies. And for the past 5 years, I've been teaching criminal social justice and police practices at CU Denver.
What does your job as a private investigator entail?
I evaluate investigations as well as completing my own, and I also am regularly an expert courtroom witness.
What experience do you have testifying in court?
I've consulted on over 100 cases, and I have been admitted as an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times, cell phone tower analysis 5 times, and general police investigation tactics 12 times, as well as avail myself regularly as an expert in forensic evidence techniques.
Tell the jury why you're here today.
Ms. Becker is facing very serious accusations, and I'm here to tell the jury about my analysis on this investigation and if it was done in accordance with professional standards.
Did you reach an opinion on if this investigation meets professional standards?
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer Professor Van Owen as an expert in police investigation procedure and tactics with special expertise in cell phone tower analysis, forensic evidence techniques, as well as crime scene reconstruction.
Objection.
I'm sorry, did you say no objection?
Objection, please.
Objection. And would you like to voir dire the witness, or do you wish to just state your objection?
Your Honor, I'd like to voir dire the witness, please.
You may proceed.
Professor Blake Van Owens, do you have any specific certification for cell tower data?
Well, I've consulted on over 100 cases, but I've never received any certification.
Do you have any education about cell tower data?
I've experience in consulting again, but no education.
That's all, Your Honor.
All right. I am going to admit this witness as an expert in the areas of crime scene reconstruction, forensic examination, and cell phone tower analysis to the extent that the people wish to attack her opinion, they can do so on cross-examination. All right. You may continue with the direct examination.
Professor Van Owen, what was your opinion on if the investigation met professional standards?
Simply put, the investigation did not reach professional standards. It was sloppy and rushed, which greatly contributed to a lack of gathering pertinent evidence in this case, which leaves significant doubt as to who the assailant of this crime is.
How did you reach the conclusion that it was sloppy and rushed?
I reviewed police reports, the crime scene reconstruction, and cell phone tower analysis, as well as conducting my own investigation in parts of this case that were neglected by the original investigating team.
And what did you find in your investigation?
I found a multitude of evidence or lack thereof that caught my attention, such as the lack of information regarding Mr. Brackman's Ring doorbell and the collection of phone screenshots.
First, let's talk about the doorbell. What did you find in this part of your evaluation?
I found that Detective Markowitz did not obtain the full user count records regarding Mr. Brackman's Ring doorbell, which could have given insight as to whether or not the victim was alerted to an intruder.
To your second point, what did you find when evaluating the collection of screenshots?
I found it surprising that the police had just simply accepted screenshots of the messages when they had the necessary technology, Celebrite, in order to do a more exhaustive search of Alex Cifuentes' phone.
What is Celebrite?
Celebrite is a technology that police use to download contents of a phone.
When would someone use Celebrite?
Since screenshots can easily be doctored, the police would use Celebrite to download all the contents of the phone, including the original text messages. And in this investigation, the police had the necessary technology in order to determine if the alleged texts were truly sent by Miss Becker, and they chose not to use it in a serious murder investigation.
Based on these two pieces of evidence, the Ring doorbell and screenshots, what did you conclude?
This is just another instance where Mr. Kuzak and Detective Markowitz failed to fully evaluate and collect evidence in this case. I believe that the investigating team took shortcut in evidence collection by jumping to the easy conclusion.
Why do you believe they jumped to the easy conclusion?
Mr. Kuzak and Detective Markowitz, I believe, found their evidence based on their theory instead of basing their theory on all the evidence. I found this in my investigation of the murder weapon, the cell phone tower analysis, as well as another possible suspect.
Let's break down those points. What did you find in your investigation of the murder weapon?
I concluded that no one can say certainly that Mr. Brackman was stabbed in the midst of a struggle due to the construction of the knife's handle. It is in fact more likely that Mr. Brackman was surprised and stabbed from behind.
Tell us about the importance of a knife's construction.
Contrary to popular belief, due to the construction of the murder weapon's handle, the assailant would not hold the knife in the classic fashion, how you would see in the shower scene in Psycho with the blade facing down. It would be more comfortable and therefore more likely for the assailant to hold the knife with the blade facing up, especially if intending to use it in an overhead fashion.
What significance does this knife grip have in Mr. Brackman's murder?
In order for Mr. Brackman to be, Mr. Brackman's wound to be inflicted in the way it was, the knife of the blade had to have been facing up. Yet under Detective Markowitz's theory, which Mr. Brackman was standing and struggling with an assailant when he was stabbed, that means the assailant must have been much bigger than Mr. Brackman in order to reach over and stab and inflict the wound in the way that it was, which blatantly contradicts the size of the assailant seen on the Ring doorbell footage. This is just another instance where the evidence and theory don't add up.
You mentioned shortcomings in the cell phone tower analysis. What did you find in this part of your evaluation?
There were two main points that I gathered. One is that cell phone tower data is not as accurate as GPS data, and the other is that the investigative team failed to obtain full and complete records of the cell phone tower data, leaving out significant or possible vital information.
Let's break down those 2 points. First, why is cell phone tower data not as accurate as GPS?
Cell phones can connect with a multitude of towers, and it's not always the closest one. So all we know is that Miss Becker's phone, not necessarily Miss Becker herself, could have been anywhere within a 38 square mile location surrounding Mr. Brackman's house at that time.
Regarding your second point, what information did you find lacking in the cell phone tower analysis?
Detective Markowitz did not obtain cell phone tower data related to Miss Perkins' phone in order to corroborate Ms. Becker's potential alibi. Detective Markowitz also did not do nearly enough in the investigation of another possible suspect, Blair Rollins.
Who is Blair Rollins?
Blair Rollins is another suspect I discovered in my investigation.
Did Blair Rollins have any connection to Mr. Brackman?
Yes, his father, Jonathan Rollins, was previously represented by Mr. Brackman in court, which unfortunately resulted in Jonathan Rollins being convicted and sent to jail. I actually have a recording of Jonathan Rollins' court proceedings.
Your Honor, permission for Professor Van Owen to listen to an audio recording of Exhibit 22 constructively.
Objection.
What is the basis of the objection?
Relevance.
What's the response to relevance of this other court proceeding?
Your Honor, the defense is entitled to point out flaws in the investigative team's investigation. So therefore, Exhibit 22 gives probative value into another possible suspect and alternate theory of the case.
While I will allow the witness to testify about the possible suspect, I don't think that listening to or record another court proceeding is necessary in this case. So I will sustain the objection with regard to playing of the proceeding. But you can ask this about the alternate suspect.
Thank you, Your Honor. What did you find in your investigation of Blair Rollins?
As part of my investigation, I looked into the school records from the day of the murder and discovered that Blair Rollins was absent that day. Another thing I gathered in my investigation was that Blair Rollins and Alex Cifuentes were friends.
Did you find anything else in your investigation of Blair?
Yes, after listening to the court recording and learning about the relationship Blair had with Mr. Brackman, I gathered that Miss Blair would have had a much stronger motive to kill Brackman, and that there were other suspects who are of the same build as Avery, such as Blair Rollins, that weren't even considered during the investigation of this case.
With this insight on Blair Rollins, as well as the lacking information in the cell phone tower analysis, what is your final opinion on the way the investigative team arrived at their conclusion?
The investigative team rushed to judgment leaves significant doubt as to who committed this crime. The investigation was sloppy and overlooked pertinent evidence, including another possible suspect. This investigation was not done in accordance with professional standards.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Van Owens. My name is Aiden Feltz, and I'm an attorney of the prosecution, and I'm here to ask you a few questions. So let's talk about your career history. You worked with the Aurora Police Force, correct?
I did for about 9 months in between 2005 and 2006.
And you left the force after an altercation, as you said, with a young woman of color.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
What is the relevance?
This is relevant because we're talking about, this is important for the jury to know how they can feel about this witness and whether they can trust him at all, and knowing that they left the force after injuring someone. I think that this is clearly very relevant.
All right. I'm going to sustain the objection.
Thank you. And you are now a professor, correct?
I'm a professor at CU Denver, lecturing on police practices and social justice, yes.
Moving forward, you thought that the text messages between Alex Cifuentes and Avery Becker were doctored, correct?
It is quite possible that they were doctored, especially when we were given no information or confirmation if they were doctored or not.
Did you provide any evidence that they were doctored in your witness statement?
I wasn't able to gain access to the phone as to I am reviewing the investigation. I am just able to point out where the investigation failed in doing a more exhaustive search of Alex Cifuentes' phone, even when they had the necessary technology to.
Okay. Now let's talk a bit about your theory about Blair Rollins. You retrieved Jonathan Rollins' excited utterance from his court proceeding, correct?
I did, yes.
But you didn't.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, the sound has gone out for Mr. Feltz.
Uh-oh.
Testified in his father's trial, correct?
Mr. Feltz, this is Judge Bowles. That you cut out for a period of time there.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I think it was just the technology. So I think you were asking the witness some questions about the court proceedings that you objected to, and I sustained that objection. So those court proceedings did not come into evidence, if that's where your question was going. So, but you may now continue on with your direct examination.
But Professor Van Owens, you didn't retrieve the section where Blair Rowlands testified in his father's trial, did you?
I didn't think it was necessary as to he was speaking on another case. I just thought it was necessary that the investigation know that Blair Rowlands was present earlier that day at his father's trial.
Now let's talk about your theory about how Mackenzie Brackman was killed. You disagree with Kyle Cusack about his theory that Brackman and the killer got into a fight that ended up with Brackman being killed from a bear hug position, being stabbed in his shoulder, correct?
I do. I think under Cusack and Detective Markowitz's theory with the bear hug, the assailant must have been much bigger in order to have reached over and to inflicted the wound in the way that it was, which is why I think it was more likely that Brackman was surprised and stabbed from behind.
Mackenzie Brackman did have the Ring Video doorbell app, which would have notified him that a masked intruder was entering his house, correct?
He had the app, but we do not know, and we are deprived of the information of whether or not his notifications were turned on or not. And even if they were turned on, we cannot say if he actually saw the notifications or not.
But it is reasonable to assume that that could have happened.
It's possible, yes, but we don't know.
Were there broken plates on the floor?
There was a broken plate, yes.
And scuff marks?
Scuff marks, yes, but we aren't able to tell how or when the scuff marks were made.
And you base your theory also on what way it is comfortable to hold a knife, correct?
Based on the construction of the knife handle, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect of this witness?
May I request a time check?
Certainly.
I have 5 minutes and 10 seconds left for you.
Yeah, I have 3 minutes and 15. So.
Okay. Yes, a redirect, please, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Mr. Feltz was asking you about the bear hug and knife construction. Is there any way that you can better explain to the jury how one would naturally grip a knife?
Yes, knives are, or the knife in this case, are built so that someone's fingers are comfortably held on one side. So when intending to use it in an overhead fashion with this knife, the blade will result in pointing up, and I actually have a picture that depicts this more clearly.
Your Honor, permission for Professor Van Owen to constructively view Exhibit 21?
Yes.
Okay.
You're looking at Exhibit 21. Would you identify it, please?
Yes, this is the picture that depicts the grip that I was explaining more clearly.
How did you obtain Exhibit 21?
In my investigation of this case.
Is this a fair and accurate representation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer Exhibit 21.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 21 is admitted.
Your Honor, permission to publish to jury?
Granted.
And permission for co-counsel to share Exhibit 21?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Van Owen, with this picture, would you explain and demonstrate how this impacts Mr. Brackman's murder?
Well, with this grip, it would be quite, sorry. With this grip, it is more likely that Mr. Brackman was stabbed from behind and surprised in order for the wound to be inflicted with the knife point pointing up. Because with under Detective Markowitz's theory, as I stated earlier, he would have to reach the assailant would have to reach all the way over and use incredible force in order for the wound to be inflicted in the way that it was, which means the assailant must have had to have been much bigger than Mr. Brackman, which we know is not true.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Does defense have any additional witnesses that they wish to call?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Right. And the people, do they have any rebuttal witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the prosecution rests.
All right. We'll now proceed then to closing arguments. The people will go first. Would the people like to make a closing argument?
Your Honor, we would like to make a closing argument.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. The picture that Avery Brackman was simply a bit disgruntled that he was kicked off of his mock trial team could not be further from the truth. Today, we have seen how the defendant, Avery Becker, went from rejection to rage to revenge. We believe beyond reasonable doubt that Avery Becker is guilty of the felony murder and burglary of a beloved high school mock trial coach, Mr. Mackenzie Brackman. Witnesses for the prosecution and defense have described Avery Becker as becoming furious over criticism of his mock trial efforts. His anger reached its limit when he was heavily criticized for his performance after the regional rounds, a round where his team won and received performance awards. Who did the coach think he was talking to? The defendant knew he was already a better lawyer than this coach was, so why would he have to listen to criticism from a less skilled lawyer? The answer is he didn't. She went out into the parking lot and vandalized Mr. Brackman's car. She was kicked off the team on the spot. When she went home, she didn't tell her mother why she had been kicked off the team, but she did vow that she would get Mr. Brackman back if it was the last thing she did. The defendant even tried to lobby Alex Cifuentes to help get back onto the team. When Mr. Cifuentes advised that the defendant that Mr. Brackman would not let her get back on the team, the defendant went into rage. If Mr. Brackman was upset about his car, he's going to be real upset when he sees what I do to his house. Despite being warned by Alex Cifuentes not to retaliate, the defendant showed up at Mr. Brackman's house on the afternoon of March 6, 2020. When she entered his house, she was met by Mr. Brackman, who was already armed with one of his knives inside the back door. The defendant may have just wanted to vandalize Mr. Brackman's house if he had got, as he had done to his car. But seeing Mr. Brackman armed caused the defendant to fight, even though flight was a few steps away. In the struggle, the defendant stabbed Mr. Brackman in the left shoulder blade. The knife penetrated down and severed Mr. Brackman's heart. Upon removal of the knife from his back, Mr. Brackman was dead before he hit the floor. You have the burden of proof to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt all the elements necessary to constitute the crimes charged. For both murder of the first degree and burglary, you must show the defendant perpetrated the crimes in the state of Colorado at or about the date of places charged while acting alone or for others. We have shown that the defendant did commit or attempted to do second degree murder. And this occurred when the defendant unlawfully entered Mackenzie Brackman's house with an intent to commit criminal mischief. The ring video clearly showed the unlawful entry, and intent to commit criminal mischief is shown by the defendant's text messages to Alex Cifuentes. And first degree murder occurs when in the crime of second degree burglary while being committed or in the immediate flight, therefore, the death of a person other than one of the participants was caused by anyone. Here, the defendant caused the death of a person while committing the crime of second degree burglary. And Detective Markmus explained how this investigation focused on the mock trial team. Although she was unable to interview the defendant, she did obtain his or her cell phone records. An expert in cell phone data, Detective Markmus was able to place the defendant's cell phone in close proximity to Mr. Brackman's house on March 6, 2020. Despite the alibi provided by defendants by his or her best friend, Taylor Perkins, the defendant's cell phone was truly lost. Why would Taylor Perkins be sending text messages to it? And the ring video doorbell clearly showed the break-in and exit in the defendant from Mr. Brackman's home. This video explains why there were no identifying traces in the home. The defendant was wearing full gloves and a face mask. And we have seen that Taylor Perkins would do anything to help out his or her best friends. And Professor Blake Van Owens, he has demonstrated very sloppy research, failing to provide any real evidence for his theory about Blair Rollins. Somebody leaving town is not substantive evidence. He could have pulled how Blair Rollins, what he testified at his father's trial, but he didn't. He chose to get a random, excited utterance from it. The defense case is built on conjecture and speculation. but they have offered nothing to refute that the defendant was rejected from his team. He flew into a rage and extracted revenge on Coach Brackman. The prosecution requests that you would return a verdict of guilty on both charges. And may I please reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal?
You may. You'll have to check with the time. I think you have 1 minute left. Does defense wish to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
We are here today because of a failed investigation. The prosecution claims that Avery Becker broke into Mackenzie Brackman's house and killed him. On what basis? The prosecution has led a sloppy investigation. They have failed to present any evidence to refute Miss Becker's alibi. They have failed to investigate a single other theory of the case. Put plainly, they have failed. The evidence didn't fit, so the investigation quit. Our client, Avery Becker, is here today to defend herself against the false accusations of felony murder and second-degree burglary. Jury instruction number 1 states that the fact that the defendant has been accused is not evidence that the defendant committed any crime. In order to find Ms. Becker guilty, the prosecution must prove she committed both counts beyond a reasonable doubt. It is their burden of proof. The defense does not have this burden. Now, what does reasonable doubt mean? Jury instruction number 2 explains a doubt founded on reason and common sense, which arises from a fair and rational consideration of all of the evidence and lack of evidence in the case. Let's talk about their evidence and whether or not it meets this burden. First, did the prosecution bother to track Taylor Perkins' phone the day of the murder? No. Detective Markowitz could have tracked Miss Perkins' phone using GPS data to corroborate Miss Becker's alibi. Instead, they relied on inconclusive cell tower data, placing Miss Becker's phone within a range of 38 miles from Mr. Brackman's house. But Avery didn't have her phone. Mr. Feltz asked why Taylor would be texting the phone if Avery didn't have it. They were texting the phone so that they could find it. They spent the entire day looking for it with Miss Perkins, an unrefuted alibi. This disproves elements number 1 and 2 of the crime of second-degree burglary, that Miss Becker herself was at the location of the crime. This therein disproves the remaining 4 elements. And the failure to prove just one of these elements is a failure to meet the burden of proof. They've proven none. This creates reasonable doubt. Next, did the prosecution bother to verify the supposed text messages between Alex Cifuentes and Miss Becker? No. The police accepted screenshots as legitimate texts, which they claim show Avery's intent. But screenshots can easily be altered. Alex would be the last person Miss Becker would text. And why would she text him with a plan of revenge? This did not fall in line with Avery's character, who was notorious for never planning out anything. The prosecution's sloppy investigation creates reasonable doubt. Finally, did the prosecution investigate anyone other than Miss Becker? No. This brings us to Blair Rollins. Did Blair Rollins murder Mackenzie Brackman? We don't know. But could Blair Rollins have broken into Mr. Brackman's house? Could things have escalated? Could Alex have helped? Yes, yes, and yes. They had motive. And we don't know how many other of Mr. Brackman's clients also had motive. The prosecution failed to investigate a single other suspect. Their failure to do so is cause for reasonable doubt. When the evidence didn't fit, the investigation quit. There is not one, but 3 sources of reasonable doubt we presented to you today. As to the elements of the crime of felony murder, elements number 4 and 5 state that in the course of committing second-degree burglary, the defendant caused the death of a person. But because the elements of second-degree murder have not been proven, neither have those of felony murder. As a result, the prosecution has failed to meet the burden of proof. According to the jury instructions you have received, you must find my client, Avery Becker, not guilty on both counts. Thank you.
Thank you. And the people can do a rebuttal closing argument with whatever remaining time they have.
Thank you. Firstly, we'd like to talk about how Taylor Perkins was messaging on the day of the murder and how it supposedly was missing. Text messaging them, the phone is not gonna make a lot of enough of a noise compared to calling them. So that really does not make any sense at all. As well, in the defense's previous closing, they just said that it didn't fall within the character that she would be texting Alexa Fuentes her plan to break in the house. It clearly does. The defendant has clearly showed how she likes to escalate situations greatly. So this is a very fair assessment to make. As well, we'd like to establish how.
And that will conclude the closing arguments then. So I believe now at this point in time, it's for the scorers to calculate their scores. And I believe perhaps our monitor can assist me in this. I believe that we should not do any critique until the scores are completed.
Yes, I believe so.
Right. So the scorers can proceed, and when they are done, if they will just let us know when they have finished their scoring, and then we can spend a few minutes critiquing if we have any.
I'm done, Your Honor.
Right.
I have a quick question. Where do I enter the score? I have it written down, but I don't know where I enter it online.
And hopefully our monitor can advise on that.
Yes, there's a link. I'm about to put it in the chat. Let me get it from my email.
Thank you.
I'm done, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I've sent it into the chat of the meeting. Let me know if it works. I'm not sure.
It works well.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. West, just let me know when you have completed it and got that entered. Ms. West, are you finished with your entry of your scoring?
Your Honor, this is Ann West. I'm working on it as fast as I
Oh,
can.
okay, that's all right. That's fine.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
no,
working
that's fine.
on it.
I just wasn't sure if you had dropped off and I didn't know that yet. Or
Yeah,
not.
no, I'm working on it. Sorry about the delay.
That's all right. Well, hold on.
Okay. Okay. My scores should be in, Your Honor.
All right, then I think that completes the scoring, so we can do a little critique. I believe we're limited to 12 minutes, but maybe we should try to keep it a little less. So I'm just going to briefly say thank you to all the students and all the coaches. I think you did a great job. It's really difficult in these times, even for practiced attorneys, to be doing a hearing by Zoom or WebEx, and I think you all did a great job. The one critique I'm going to give you, and it's really only applicable to mock trials, is make sure you keep in mind whether the person playing a character is a male or a female, because we had a lot of he's when the person who was playing the character was a she, or vice versa. So whatever you need to do to try to keep that in mind, if you write out your scripts, maybe have a place for he, she, and cross it out so you don't make that mistake. But that's a very, very minor critique from me. Otherwise, I think you all did a great job. So I'm going to go in order of how I see the scorers on my screen. And Mr. van der Veen, you're first on my screen. So why don't you go?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, good job. Congratulations on getting the first round under your belt. I've done a lot of mock trial. I understand how stressful the first round is. I think I have two quick things for feedback. I think everybody could afford a little bit to slow down. There are points where it was going pretty fast. And it was hard for me to keep up with what was going on. The second big thing for feedback would be, I had a judge one time tell me you got to put the hay down low where the goats can get at it. And what he meant was there's a lot of big words and a lot of fancy terms. I know somebody said aorta at one point, talking about the heart and all that stuff. And simply put, sometimes jurors aren't going to pick up on those things. They're not going to know what you're talking about. So when you're talking about jury instructions and you're talking about the more complicated aspects of this, it's a little bit better to just use language. It's a little bit simpler. But everybody did a really great job today. I liked everybody's pace and tone, and I enjoyed listening to this. So I appreciate that.
And Mr. Hepp, you're next on my screen, so you go next.
All right, thanks, Your Honor. I thought everybody did really well. Yeah, maybe slowing down a little bit, but I thought everyone's projection and what was well done. For the defense, real good job on the theme and focusing back to the elements. It's a good thing to do in mock trial. It's even better in real life. But yeah, first one under the belt. I thought it was well organized, and everyone's tone I thought was appropriate. So good luck next round, but well done.
And then Ms. West.
Thank you. Yes, I want to congratulate all the groups. I thought your use of, your presentations, given that it's a video format, and your use of the technology was excellent. I was expecting a lot more hiccups and problems, and I thought you guys handled it amazingly well. And so, I just congratulate you on that. I thought your professionalism in handling objections and responding to them in a professional way, and the way you addressed the judge was excellent. And I was really impressed with that. My one thing I would probably recommend is when you're asking questions of the witness and when you're kind of making objections, just to be a little more clear about your purpose of it, and maybe setting it up with a bit more context, just so that it kind of ties in with the theme of your opening or closing statement, and so that it kind of all is a seamless presentation. I think that's one way you could just kind of guide the questions and maybe help the person watching as far as what your point is of the question. But beyond that, I just want to congratulate you all. I thought you did an excellent job.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure for me. I'll ask our monitor, is there anything else that we need to address before we end this session?
I just need to confirm that the score sheets were all put in.
All right. And I'll go through again. Mr. van der Veer, is your score sheet put in? Okay. And Mr. Hepp? Yep. And Ms. West?
Yes.
All right. And is that it then?
Other than that, I just want to thank everyone for connecting, and just to let them know that their teacher or coach will notify them what courtroom they're going to be going next for the next round.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being part of this, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank
you so much.